Hello and welcome to the big picture. For the last over 2 days, the tragedy which struck Nepal and parts of India has taken nearly 3,500 lives and the number is growing. The devastation caused in Nepal and some parts of India has once again revived the debate about various aspects of facing and tackling such disasters. India has in recent years witnessed devastating earthquakes in Latur in Maharashtra in 1993, Gujarat in 2001, Kashmir in 2005, and other disasters like tsunami in 2004, among others. Ever since, a lot of work has gone into studying these disasters and planning and tackling them. The National Disaster Management Authority has been set up along with National Disaster Response Force. However, there are still a lot of gaps. It is said that almost 54% of the land in India are vulnerable to earthquakes. 10 cities which are seen as high earthquake-prone zones include Guwahati, Srinagar, Delhi, Mumbai, Chennai, Pune, Kochi, Kolkata, Thiruvananthapuram and Patna. Today we will look at how prepared are we as a nation to face disasters like earthquakes and what still needs to be done to avert major human tragedies of the kind being witnessed in Nepal and some parts of India now and in Gujarat and Latur in the past. To discuss this, I have with me Kamal Kishore, Member National Disaster Management Authority, M. Ramachandran, former Secretary Urban Development in the Government of India, K.J. Anand Kumar, Associate Professor, National Institute of Disaster Management, and Devjyoti Mitra, Senior Analyst, Earthquake Modeling at RMS. Welcome to all of you. Mr. Ramachandran, you must have, seen this kind of disasters and planned for this and discussed about this. After what we have seen, what we are seeing in Nepal, can we confidently say that we are, prepared for something like that happening here?
What I can say is, compared to earlier days when we used to be in districts, things have changed a lot.
Yes.
And I think the setting up of the Disaster Management Authority has made a substantial difference in terms of educating the people who should be getting involved, in terms of spreading the message. I think Mr. Kishore will talk about the manuals and things like that. But what is critical at the field level is the implementation.
Right.
I think all said and done, in all this what happens is how quick is the response? How well trained are people who are supposed to be leading the process at that level? And how effectively whatever material has to be taken to the sites required, can that happen? All these become critical, and also in normal times, I think we as people, we are not much concerned as to what disaster is going to be. We become aware and alert to it only when a disaster happens. So it's a question of preparing people also on a continuing basis, not a one-time effort, especially in sensitive areas. You referred to the seismic zones. I worked in the state of Uttarakhand, which is mostly seismic zone 5. And these are areas which cannot be reached quickly also because
right.
Normally in the hill terrain, there is only one road, and if some road is blocked, there are problems. There were issues with regard to communication, which I suppose must be gradually changing now. So it's one thing to have good intentions at the apex level, but generally on a continuing basis, we have to verify it at the ground level as to whether people at the ground level are equally prepared or not. If materials are stored at certain places, whether it is continuously available to meet an emergency, because there could be situations where we have everything on paper, there are shelters provided for, there are places where food grains, etc. could be stored. But if the road itself is not in a working condition, just before an earthquake or so happens, if the provisions could not reach, there are issues. There are also issues relating to, I was told, about airdropping.
Right.
Airdropping of relief material is little easier in the plain areas, not so much in the hill areas. So probably what I understand relating to my earlier experiences, especially for the hill and difficult terrain, one has to be a little bit more alert, and one has to have mechanisms whereby the issues specific to those areas can be better addressed.
Okay, you spoke about being prepared, but first we need to know, Devjyoti, we need to know, because there are a lot of rumors in the last 48 hours ever since this happened, that more earthquakes are going to come, more aftershocks are going to come. Now tell me, as far as predicting earthquakes are concerned, where are we? Where are we? Not just in India, but everywhere across the world.
See, as far as prediction goes, we are way ahead than what we used to be. So right now,
when you say we, which means seismologists,
everyone, like
Everyone.
as a scientist, the whole
Scientist, yeah.
earthquake community. So when I used to study here as a bachelor's in India, there was not much awareness, I would say. But then I went on to do my master's in earthquake engineering. I learned a lot more. And in the past 20 years, there has been a lot of improvements. There have been massive improvements. Mostly, there have been involvement of companies like RMS, who were started based on the model of earthquake in 1990s in California, which is the hub of earthquake research. And from there on, we have improved a lot. India is a little difficult as a market because there are a lot of issues involved. First of all, there is a lot of irregular construction going on everywhere, and a lot of
So
it.
when you say India as a market, what do you mean?
I mean, for earthquake.
Earthquake.
Earthquake awareness, earthquake,
okay.
earthquake infrastructure,
Okay.
everything. So when you come to a place like India, there are a lot of variables that come into play.
What are these variables?
First variable is awareness, which is most important, which we still lack compared to other countries, mostly developed nations, I would say. Then we lack the infrastructure, and then mostly we lack the seriousness, the promptness that is required. The disaster comes into effect when an event has happened. But what before that?
Exactly.
So what before that? We can always reduce an accident or a building falling down if we go into codes. Indian codes are decent. I would not say the best in the world.
Indian codes.
Indian building codes.
Building codes. Okay.
The building codes which govern the building of the structures in our country, they are decent, they are not bad, and we are continuously improving in that aspect. However, the implementation on ground is quite different. And
No, but we're coming back to the question of prediction.
Yes.
Where are we?
prediction has improved. We cannot say the exact moment and time that this will happen on this date, this AM or PM. But at the same time, we have reached an area where we can predict the magnitude, approximately the magnitude based on the type of earthquake we have. There are actually 3 or 4 different types of earthquakes that happen.
What are these?
So
What are these 3 or 4 types?
3 or 4 types are based on the kind of faults you have, the kind of movements they have. It can be east or west or north and south,
Okay.
based on those. So based on those, we are predicting earthquakes, the magnitude, which
No,
is
what
more
is the time frame in which you can predict? Let us say, can you predict that in the next 24 hours or next 48 hours or next 6, or is it that, what is the time frame you can give?
It's mostly like bigger earthquakes, probably like 50 years, in a span of 50 years. Smaller earthquakes, 10 years, 15 years, because it's more about release of energy.
So all these SMSs and all these in the last
Yes.
48 hours which people were receiving or seeing on the social media, it's going to happen between 1:30 and 2:30. All these things are just imaginations.
Yes.
Just imagination.
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Kamal Kishore, your reaction to what has happened, and now first, what has happened in Gujarat. In fact, a lot of people have died in India also, in parts of Bihar and some parts of UP and in Bengal and all that. But it is interesting that these were smaller towns. Bigger cities have not been affected, though Patna is supposed to be one of the high seismic zones. How has the NDMA reacted to it? Was NDMA aware of something like this coming up?
Yeah, thank you for that question. I think an earthquake of this magnitude in that part of the world has been expected for a long time. And we've been discussing a possibility of an earthquake near Kathmandu Valley for, decades. So in that sense, it is not surprising at all. And I think in that sense, I can say that very confidently that in the last 15 years or 20 years, our preparedness to respond has improved dramatically. The earthquake happened between 11 and 12 on Saturday, and our first response teams were airborne within 4 hours.
To Nepal?
To Nepal. And if it was to respond to India, it would be even faster. So So in that
These
sense,
places in Bihar and all where it affected, what was the kind of response, and where were the
there
response
also
teams?
our teams were on their way within the first hour of
No,
the event.
are your teams based in state headquarters or only in Delhi?
The NDRF battalions are in many different locations across the country, and there is a strategy according to which they are located. So the teams that had to go to Bihar and UP were on the way very swiftly. So, but it's not just that the team were on the way, but they were also prepared with the right kind of training, equipment, and know-how. We have specialized search and rescue teams, trained sniffer dogs, search and rescue teams that have equipment to lift collapsed RCC slabs, RCC cutters, and they go in a very sort of self-sufficient format where they don't rely on local resources. They don't become a local...
It's a team of 45 people. That's what I've read somewhere.
Yes, so they exactly, and then they go self-contained and they can respond very swiftly. So we have certainly made progress on that front. We have to do much more. I can't say that it is enough, but you know, 1998, 2000, 2001 Gujarat earthquake, we didn't have the kind of trained collapse structure search and rescue teams that we have now, and it's a very specialized area of work, you know, to rescue people from collapse structures. So we have improved tremendously. However, we need to do much more.
What more?
More in terms of having trained people as close to the communities that are vulnerable as possible, because your golden hour is the first
Absolutely.
hour. You know, I mean, even 4 hours is, you know, is a bit late. You know, the sooner you get there, the better it is.
Sorry, coming to Nepal, what happened in Kathmandu and other places around it, that country didn't have the kind of response mechanisms, right? If they had the kind of response mechanism which you're talking, which India has now to some extent, that damage would have been much less?
The damage would be the
deaths
same.
would have been much less?
The damage would be the same, but our...
Damage would be the same.
The damage would be the same, and that's a separate issue we should come to in a bit. But our ability to save lives from collapsed structures will be much higher.
So this is where countries like Nepal and needs to improve, and we also need to improve.
We also need to improve at the local level.
Professor Mr. Anand Kumar,
yes.
What are the lacunas which you, as somebody who works in this field, what are the lacunas that India has? You know, Devjyoti was talking about building codes and things like that. As somebody rightly pointed out, in the last 48 hours, many people have been tweeting and writing on social media and even in newspapers. And earthquake doesn't cause deaths, building collapses cause deaths. So to that extent, how is India placed as far as building earthquake resistant buildings are concerned?
As pointed out by others, we have progressed a lot from what we were previously, but still we have to go. And as they were pointing out, especially Mr. Ramachandran was pointing out, that on the ground, a lot of things has to be implemented. Though we have a lot of building codes and everything on paper, we don't have that implementation capability. It is not the capability, that rather we can say that it has to be implemented with the will of the all the people, stakeholders, because it cannot be in a democratic country like ours. We don't implement by force or by any other means. So this is the only thing we can do. So as a part of that, in National Institute of Disaster Management, what we do is we give training to the officials as well as the other people, so that we try to sensitize these people by talking about how vulnerable these cities are through different kind of trainings. And about earthquake, we also train the engineers on rapid visual assessment of the building, so that at least some of the cities like Delhi and other cities, people can be at least start thinking. Actually, for the past 2 days, people start talking about these kind of things, but we should talk about these kind of things almost every day, so that slowly these issues can be flagged, and then slowly we can get things evolved. And as others were pointing out, it is very important to also think that what will be our, what we will do after such kind of events. So that is very important. At present, generally people get panicked. And as you were telling, there were rumors about the earthquake again occurring at 9 o'clock in the night and all these things. These are all
1:45 a.m.
Yes, completely rumors without any base, because as he was pointing out, RMSI people, there is no certainty that we cannot predict about the timing of the earthquake. We know that these are the regions prone to earthquake, but there is no forecast in the whole world to tell that exactly what time we can have another earthquake or tremor to continue or aftershocks to come. So these kind of rumors at least had to stop, because the people can be easily sensitized through several way nowadays, because social media is there, TVs are there, and everywhere. From the past 2-3 days, we have been keeping on telling that only these 2-3 days people talk about this.
Yes,
and at least we should realize that these kind of rumors should not be spread further, especially to create panic among the people.
Okay, Mr. Ramchandran, coming back to the issue of planning, urban planning. This is where the problem is. Today, I mean, I have been reading that 80% of people in Delhi are vulnerable to, to earthquake, in the sense that they could be victims of an earthquake. 80% of the people, and we have been witnessing for the last several years, now, that a huge lot of unauthorized constructions goes on in major metropolitan cities and also in smaller cities, and then over a period of time they get regularized, and these are the most vulnerable people.
Absolutely, you're right. I think it's a complex issue. I mean, we become aware or serious about an issue when the issue happens.
Yes.
But before that, what should we be careful about? What should we be aware of? You refer to the national capital, though I do not like to repeat this, but it's a fact that in the national capital, little over 30% is unauthorized colonies. Little over 30% is slums. So we have more than 60%, close to 70% of Delhi's area, which is extremely vulnerable, if I could put it like that. We have unauthorized colonies where even the fire engines cannot enter,
right,
where sewage lines can't be laid. But in the scheme of things, as we progress, there are no other options for the political system than to decide to regularize. Even in the normal construction, whenever it happens, the requirements are not always met. I mean, it would be worthwhile finding out about all the multi-storied constructions which are going on all over the country, as to whether all of them are earthquake resistant or not.
Right.
Now, we should also take examples from other countries. We keep looking at better instances. Japan is one country. I'm sure there would be other countries also, where they have even gone to the extent of retrofitting existing buildings. So there are methods available. One, we have to be careful about the new constructions which are coming up. In the scheme of things, even each home buyer or each commercial property buyer has to be fully aware that I have to satisfy myself that this building is earthquake resistant and the features are there. You may also recall there were instances when huge fires broke out. There were no ladders available in some of our cities.
Yes.
So on the one hand, we keep talking about cities as engines of growth. That's when everything goes positive. But when some problem arises or negatives come up, then we realize these shortcomings are there. So it's as I said, it's a complex thing. It cannot be probably changed overnight.
We were talking of building codes, how stringent are these building codes and how stringently are they applied?
It depends on the local body which is supposed to enforce it. What sort of enforcement mechanism, what sort of will is there to enforce it? If everything is fine, I think most of our problems will get solved, because then it's only a question of fighting the situation if at all a calamity happens. But our problem is the calamity happens and it gets compounded because of these deficiencies,
right,
about which we probably become a little bit aware at that particular moment. So
and then we forget.
That culture has to change. So when we talk about better governance, improved governance, all this becomes part of that improvement in governance, as to whether the codes or whether the requirements are being met or not, and whether they are getting enforced or not. That's what is critical. And I always call it, that's a culture which has to come about in our scheme of things.
Absolutely. Mr. Kamal Kishore, how much can NDMA do about all these things, about prevention? What is it that, because as I earlier pointed out, it is buildings which kill people and not the earthquake itself. So this kind of awareness, one. Second thing is, what do we do with the existing buildings, which as Mr. Ramchandran pointed out, 60% of Delhi or more than that, are hugely vulnerable.
Yes, I think let's talk about the buildings that are already there,
Yes.
and that we know are vulnerable and that have not been built according to earthquake safety
And
codes.
retrofitting is impossible
And
with this.
retrofitting is not impossible. I think retrofitting is very much possible. NDMA itself has produced through very highly consultative process retrofitting guidelines. Retrofitting is not always simple, but it is technically very much possible. And in fact,
And is it very expensive?
not necessarily. In fact, in one of the public buildings, a school building, Ludlow Castle in Delhi, it has been done. It has been done, and the cost of retrofitting a building is less than 15% of the replacement cost of the building.
Okay.
And for 15% of the replacement cost of the building, and if you look at the entire cost of the building, including the land and the finishes, it will be even smaller proportion. You can actually retrofit many buildings, not all buildings. Many buildings can be retrofitted. And this Ludlow Castle school example is while the school was actually functioning. So I mean, retrofitting work happened after school hours and in the night. Little by little, it can be done. There are many demonstration projects that have been done in India and in neighboring countries on how to retrofit buildings. So, and there is an issue of structural retrofitting of buildings, but then a lot of the hazard emanates from non-structural elements. In hospitals, equipment which is not anchored. A TV which is sitting on a shelf which could fall off in a shaking. Other equipment, and fastening them and reducing that hazard. A lot of the damage from earthquakes or injury and deaths from the earthquakes happen not only from the structure but also from other elements which basically become a falling hazard. So a lot of these simple things can be done to reduce the risk of loss of lives and loss of property. But at the same time, as the previous speaker said, that I think the bigger issue and also an equally important issue is that all the new building stock that is coming
That
up.
is exactly.
As our colleague from RMS.
Sorry to intervene. Like, the last big earthquake which we witnessed in this country was in Gujarat 2001. It's now nearly 15 years since that. What are the lessons we have learned from that?
I think it is fair to say that now the awareness about need for making buildings earthquake resistant is much higher than it was.
Awareness
in
is, you say that higher awareness, but what about implementation?
The higher awareness means there is a much greater demand, and actually people are asking builders whether the building that are being made are earthquake resistant or not. I'm not sure, I cannot comment whether actually that compliance is happening or not, but there is definitely much more awareness. In fact, if you see in the newspapers, some of the builders, when they advertise their property, they say that it's earthquake resistant. But whether that statement is backed by actual compliance, I don't know. But we are moving in the right direction. We really have to sort of make much greater efforts to make sure that all our new building stock is earthquake resistant. As RMS colleague highlighted, that we have building codes. We've had building codes since mid-70s. They are not the best building codes, but they are very good building codes. And we have model building bylaws produced by Town and Country Planning Organization, which require adherence to building codes in the building permit process. We just need to enforce that. And general public needs to realize that it's not just about enforcement, it's also about compliance.
Absolutely. Devjyoti, what is the element of compliance in these matters? One. Second thing is, do the authorities, whether it is the municipal authorities, corporation authority, whoever, who has to give that completion certificate, for any buildings, do they insist on earthquake resistance, be earthquake resistant materials being used, or the buildings are made earthquake resistant?
I guess it depends on the individual who is looking, how much he knows himself about the codes, because a lot of place it happens that the person himself probably doesn't know all the details about the codes. Another thing is, our earthquake code the Indian standard, came out back in 2002, just after the Gujarat earthquake.
Right.
So it was developed back then. And our all seismic zones, we have 5 seismic zones in
Right.
India, and they are all based off of that.
Based on that 2002 code.
Yes.
Okay.
That's where we get all the building, you can say how to build for earthquake. However, in the last 10 years, or I think it's been more than 10 years now, a lot of improvement has happened. And people all over the world have realized that just sticking to a one number is not an ideal thing, because
One number means what?
one number, let's say I have in Delhi, I have zone 4.
Yes.
So I say, as per the code, you have to apply this amount of acceleration due to the earthquake. So what happens is, people have realized that this is not an economic feasibility. So what they have done is they have categorized the type of buildings. And they have, so let's say for defense, we have a nuclear unit. So we need it to be perfect.
Yes.
May the worst earthquake
We are
come.
told Kamal Kishore and Ramchandran would, Delhi Metro is supposed to be the most ideal
Yes.
earthquake resistant.
Yes, it is.
You know?
Exactly. So let's say metro, you gave a good example. We want it to not be disturbed by the maximum amount of earthquake that has happened in Delhi. Probably worse than that. We apply some factor of safety. So even if an 8 happens, 8 magnitude earthquake happens,
It will
still stand.
Yes.
So, but for say a 2-story house or a 1-story house, it might not be that important to withstand an 8 earthquake. So we may lower down the design, so that, you know, if I design a 2-story building for 8 magnitude earthquake, it involves a lot of costs.
So cost is a major issue.
Yes, it is. That is why people don't
People
comply.
don't come. Anand Kumar,
Yes.
cost is a major issue, and you know, how do we get over this? If people will say that, you know, if I'm going to buy a flat which is going to cost 5 lakh rupees more because it's earthquake resistant, how many people are able to afford it?
No,
Is
as
that
I
the
was
major issue, or do you think the government can come in somewhere here?
No, as I was telling you, the government officials are trained for this kind of purposes. Like member NDMA was telling about the not only the buildings, but the fixtures in the buildings, how they respond to when the earthquake occurs. Those also matter. Not the building is so. And as the RSMI person was telling that. May not be that 8, it may be ready to withstand even 7.5, for example, or with 8 it will develop cracks, but it will not fall down, so that people will not die, but the cracks can be repaired afterwards, or
Right.
something like that, so that your economics can be, at least you can manage with the as Kamal Kishore was telling, that it is almost 10 to 15% of what you spend. More than what you spend has to be spent to make your home retrofitted, or even while constructing, maybe 10 to 15% more if you spend, your home becomes more resistant to earthquakes.
Okay.
And this is your life. You are playing with your
Absolutely,
life.
it's a life. Very quickly, Kamal Kishore. So, what more immediately needs to be done in the light of experience of what has happened in the last 2 days? NDMA as an organization, do you have plans to improve, to tackle this kind of crisis?
Yeah, from NDMA, we are working on all the 3 fronts, you know, working on risk reduction, so making a case and pushing for implementation of guidelines that have been produced, better compliance and so on, working with town and country planning organization, also making a case for retrofitting, but also working on preparedness. I think it is important to work on all of these 3 fronts, but ultimately,
What is the kind of response you get from, you know, from the bureaucracy absolutely down till the grassroots bureaucracy? That is where the whole thing matters, right?
yes, I think the response we get is
Mixed.
is directly proportional to how fresh it is in the memory of the people.
Absolutely.
You know?
Mr.
So right now is the time to get a good response.
Absolutely.
And push
Mr.
ahead on
Ramchandran,
all
very
the 3
quickly,
fronts.
last words.
I think it's good to have all these manuals, training programs and things like that. But it's a question of, as I say, whether we are prepared to address the issue. So why can't we have test audits or you know, independent groups looking at buildings whether they are adhering to these requirements or not? and have a feedback,
Okay.
and then address it upfront to the extent possible.
Okay, sir. I think we've run out of time, but we have been hearing and reading and watching photographs of in Delhi, especially officials going around some of the colonies and checking the buildings and all that. I hope this is not something which, as Mr. Kamal Kishore and everybody says, that it's not some knee-jerk reaction. Hopefully, this will be done on a longer-term basis to avert such disasters in future. Thanks to all my guests. Please keep watching. We'll come back with another issue, the big picture, same time tomorrow.